Welcome to The Business. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Coming up on the program...
Fire.
NASA starts the countdown on Australia's space race, aiming to triple a $4 billion industry, and calls for the coalition to dump its super review from Australian super chair Heather Ridout. Those stories coming up. But first tonight, billionaire James Packer has cashed in a swag of his casino chips. After weeks of negotiations, the billionaire James Packer has sold almost half his stake in the Crown gaming empire for $1.8 billion. The sale to Hong Kong casino mogul Lawrence Ho's Melco Resorts means Mr Packer will lose his control of Crown for the first time.
He has some of the greatest assets globally. You know, they're clearly the premium assets in Australia, but even from a world standard, they are phenomenal.
Mr Packer says the move will allow him to diversify his company's investments. The tycoon resigned from the board of his family company in March last year, citing mental health issues. ABC Business editor Ian Verinder joined me. Ian, this is just 6 weeks after the Wynn deal fell through. How badly did Packer want to sell?
Desperate's probably too strong a word, but you're getting pretty close to desperate, I think. You know, he clearly wanted out, and he wanted out now.
Is this a good deal for shareholders?
Look, the share price is a lot lower than when Steve Wynn, well, not Steve Wynn, when the company Wynn, because Steve Wynn has now left Wynn, the gaming company. The share price is a lot lower, the deal is a lot less. That deal was for $14.70 or so. This is for $13, and the share price today has actually gone down because there's no certainty that this will go ahead. It needs regulatory approval. You'd have to say that there's a good chance of it going ahead, but there is still that doubt. So it's a decent price, but not as good as if Wynn had taken out the company.
I guess a bit of speculation today about the deal being with Lawrence Ho and his father. What will Australian regulators be thinking of all of this?
Well, you have to cast your mind back a little bit. Back in 2004, James Packer got into a partnership with Lawrence Ho to build casinos in Macau. Now, Lawrence's father, Stanley Ho, had the complete monopoly on casinos in Macau. He had the one casino, so that's a monopoly, I guess. And Macau has always been the one place where Chinese could actually gamble. So it's become a bit of a money laundering centre. Anyone who wanted to get their money out of China in a discreet kind of fashion went through Macau. Now, Stanley Ho has been linked to triads and triad operations, which is why he's persona non grata with casino regulators around the world. So when James Packer wanted to do a deal in Macau, he went through Lawrence Ho, the son. Now, clearly, the structure that was set up, a company called Melco, and the joint venture was Melco Crown, that structure obviously isolated Stanley Ho. Otherwise, James Packer would have been banned from Melbourne, from the Crown Casino in Melbourne and in Perth and in America, because remember, he wanted to do deals in Las Vegas as well, and the Nevada Gaming Authority is the premier casino regulator.
He walks away with $1.8 billion. What do you think he'll do with that money?
Probably go and hide, because he just wants to get out of the public limelight. He's clearly not comfortable being the head of a public company. He's resigned all his directorships. You know, this is with Crown, not just with Crown, but with his own personal company as well. He stepped down from that, and that is highly unusual. Now, he apparently has had 3 breakdowns, fairly, serious mental health breakdowns, and suffers from mental health issues, and he clearly just wants to escape the world and not be, up before the entire media world. I don't know if that's all that possible, really, though, is it? If you're a billionaire and you're going to attract attention.
Ian Verinder, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
An Australian spaceport has secured its first customer, and they don't come any bigger. NASA has chosen a fledgling Australian company building a site in the Northern Territory for its first launch from a private facility. The announcement puts a rocket under plans to expand the space industry in Australia, with hopes it'll triple the $4 billion a year sector. Daniel Ziffer reports.
The first spacewalk was 54 years ago. Almost 400 kilometres above Earth, astronauts marked the achievement by doing repair work on the International Space Station. Australia's role in space has largely been as a supporting player.
I think the computer's wiped.
Are we stuffed?
Yeah, we're stuffed.
Andy Thomas, our long-duration crew member.
Now we're on the main stage. NASA has chosen an Australian company to make its first ever launch from a private spaceport in the Northern Territory's East Arnhem Land.
It's really exciting for Australia, the space industry in Australia, and ourselves.
3, 2, 1, fire.
At least 4 launches are planned to occur next year.
NASA demands the best site location, the best teams, and also the best national setting as far as innovation and trade. And that's what we've offered for their southern launch in 2020.
A football field-sized patch of red dirt near Nhulunbuy will become a spaceport, launching sounding rockets containing scientific experiments. The remote location, near the equator, enables the space agency's scope to launch at the times and directions they need. The sounding rockets, also called research rockets, travel between 50 and 1,500 kilometres above the Earth before their payload of experiments returns to it.
And what that means for Australia is essentially a big tick and endorsement from the most significant space agency by budget, coming and looking at Australia and saying Australia's commercial sector is ripe to work with now.
Last year, the federal government announced $41 million over 4 years to establish the Australian Space Agency. Its aim? To triple what is already a $4 billion a year industry and employ 20,000 people in it in just over a decade. NASA's announcement brings that goal closer.
It is a true recognition on the global stage of where the Australian space industry is really at.
The head of the industry's peak body says space technology doesn't start and finish with rockets and satellites, but powers innovation and experimentation that changes lives and creates jobs here on Earth.
Most Australians don't understand the role that space actually plays in our day-to-day activity, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's pumping fuel, whether it's using the automatic teller machine at your bank, a host of other activities that we've become used to and take for granted.
What people can expect to see is a really bright and beautiful light that goes up, but also expect to see a lot of conversation around space and innovation and that filtering into the communities.
The countdown to Australia's next frontier begins now.
Daniel Ziffer there. Indian mining giant Adani is one step away from a green light for its controversial mega coal mine in central Queensland after the state government approved a crucial environmental plan. Adani Chief Executive Lucas Dow says the company has agreed to extra monitoring of the black-throated finch and more measures to protect its habitat.
Whilst on a number of those we didn't necessarily believe they were required as part of our meeting our conditions and obligations, in the interest of getting the plan concluded and approved, we've incorporated those and subsequently the departments approved the plan.
First proposed nearly 10 years ago, the mine is now about half the size of the original proposal. Final approval is expected by the middle of June as environmental groups continue to mount legal challenges. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is sharpening his pencils for another review of the $2.8 trillion super sector. He wants to give the regulator more power to take on industry funds. But the head of Australian Super and former RBA board member Heather Ridout says there's no need for more scrutiny. I spoke to her earlier. Heather Ridout, now that the coalition has been returned, it appears a new super war has already been declared. Do you agree?
Look, I don't think so. I think the tone of some of the comments from the new Parliamentary Secretary for Super, I think the desire of the industry is to play the long game, which super is. So I hope we can frame the sorts of discussions we should have about super performance, default membership arrangements, all these things in a non-ideological kind of context, and really play the long game for the members of super funds. And I'm optimistic we can do that.
The Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, has signalled a review, though, into superannuation. He's written to APRA, suggesting that they may need more powers to look at industry funds. What kind of message is that sending?
Well, I mean, I think the whole issue of superannuation hasn't just been a Royal Commission issue, it's a productivity review. We've had a lot of good looks at it. And what has shown up is that there are a number of poor performing funds, and Australians should not be in poor performing funds, and that's been allowed to continue far longer than it should. We've had issues like multiple accounts, we've had multiple fees for insurance. There's a whole lot of issues that the industry is cleaning up, and so it should. And I think that the issues that that the minister is concerned about. He's quite right to be concerned about it. In terms of another review of super, I'm not sure what the terms of reference of that might be, but there's been a pretty good look at the industry, and I think the industry understands what work has ahead of it in the next few years.
You do have links to unions, though, at Australian Super. How can you reassure members that they're at the centre of the interests of Australian
Look, I think
Super?
the proof is in the pudding, really. I mean, Australian Super is #1 in investment performance over a 10 or 15-year period. The fund has had union representation on its board all those years, and we really, as I said, the fund's performance has been really very top class. The Royal Commission subjected Australian Super to forensic investigation, and Ian Silk, our Chief Executive, appeared at the Royal Commission. I think we're one of the few organisations to come out there with some ticks, not even just our skin intact.
Now, Jane Hume, a former superannuation, Australian Super, I should say, employee appointed Assistant Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services, Financial Technology. Do you expect with her in that position that you will see some positive change from the top?
Well, look, I hope her early comments to saying that the culture wars are over, I think that's very positive. But Jane, I think it's an advantage that she has actually had a background in one of the funds and can bring that sort of knowledge to the table in the cabinet room. So we don't have a lot of people who don't really understand how these funds operate having that voice. So I'm confident that she'll approach this. She's got a very strong policy brain. That's what she used to do for us. So I'm very optimistic about her role. I really do feel the government has said they don't want to change super, and I think the members will really be pleased about that. The minister obviously wants to do some review around some of the outstanding arrangements, and I think that's fair enough that we need to get those things sorted. And frankly, I think it will result in a better industry.
Now, you, of course, have a history with the RBA, being a board member for 5 years. If you were still a board member with the Reserve Bank, would you be pushing for a cut to interest rates on Tuesday?
Well, I'm not a member of the Reserve Bank board anymore, and I have a view about it. Look, I think it's inevitable that we'll probably have a reduction in interest rates next week, and they never come in ones, they tend to come in twos, and but not necessarily consecutively. So I think the bank has already signalled that, as they should and as they do. The economy, monetary policy is made for the lags are long, so there'll be at least 12 months that they're looking out, and they obviously believe that the economy will warrant a lower interest rate structure, that the level of inflation isn't a risk, that unemployment is not coming down as quickly as they thought. So I think generally it's a smart decision. That said, I think it'll hit savers quite hard. There's one of the things I noticed on the bank when I was there was that we usually always, in taking decisions about interest rate, had the interests of savers at heart. And when you're getting very little on your term deposits, etc., to go down another 25, 50 points, it can be quite hard for people, and that drives other behaviours.
Some banks, I'm thinking Westpac, for example, believe that there will be even more than 2 cuts, perhaps 3, even 4. JP Morgan suggesting 4 in the next 12 months. What does that suggest about how our economy is faring?
Well, it suggests the economy is going to get softer, and it does appear to be getting softer. But I think part of that's been the politics that's going on in the Western world, and which isn't particularly productive. I think the trade wars between China and America and Australia could come off worse for that. And investment professionals, for one of the few times in history, really have to look hard at world politics.
Heather Ridout, thanks for speaking to The Business.
Thank you.
To the markets, which sank early but rebounded into the afternoon. And in late breaking news, global investment firm KKR has appointed former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull as a global senior advisor. At the close of trade, the All Ordinaries ended flat, while the ASX 200 was up 0.1%. And the Aussie dollar is treading water. It's worth 69.16 US cents. Now that is all from The Business. For more on any of those stories you saw tonight, head online to our website, abc.net.au/business. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Have a great weekend.